It was fall 2008, and the floor of a Washington Convention Center was packed. It was the AUSA annual meeting and exposition, and the place was filled with officers, soldiers, and vendors. Dee Geise, who had recently taken over the position overseeing the Army's Soldier and Family Readiness Division, was walking through the busy aisles with the Secretary of the Army, Pete Guerin. She had taken her position at the Pentagon the previous year, and her first assignment was a large initiative.
It was during the Army Family Covenant. We had an initiative because of so many deployments, and we knew that it was taking a toll on our spouses that we refer to as married single parents, right? So our spouses are left behind to do all the mothering and fathering.
Dee herself had been an Army spouse, with her husband missing the birth of their second child. So she understood the importance of providing any sort of assistance to spouses.
So Secretary Guerin initiated what we called respite care for deployed spouses. And it was 8 or 16 hours during the week that the spouse could take time for themselves or take time to take care of other children. Parent-teacher conferences are difficult enough. And when you got a couple other kids in tow, you're not really focused in the way that you should be.
The initial response for the covenant had been successful, and she and Secretary Guerin had spoken to a wide range of families during the expo to get feedback. What was working? What wasn't?
A young spouse came up to Secretary Guerin and said, "I just want to thank you so much for the respite care. It's made such a difference in my quality of life, knowing that I have time to take to myself or take care of my other kids."
Dee and the secretary were so happy to hear that, so they probed further.
And Secretary Guerin asked the spouse, the young spouse, "What did you do?" And she said, "I took a bath."
Dee started to laugh, but the secretary?
And he just turned about 15 shades of red, right? Not the answer that he was expecting, but it was fantastic.
It was at that slightly comedic moment that Dee knew the Covenant Initiative was working, and she has spent the last 15 plus years continuing to implement new plans to aid not only spouses, but all family members and Army installations. In her current role as the Director of Prevention, Resilience, and Readiness, she oversees the Army's entire soldier and family readiness portfolio, which involves speaking to stakeholders around the world on a daily basis. In today's episode, our hosts sit down with Dee to talk about the people she's helped over the years, some difficult moments of her own as an Army spouse, and how fluent she still is in German. I'm Carrie Viro-Heikis, and this is Army Matters.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lieutenant General Retired Leslie C. Smith, and I'm here today with my best buddy, my best work buddy, my good friend.
That's a lot of adjectives, but that person, that's Sergeant Major of the Army retired Dan Dailey.
Yes.
That's right.
So how you doing, man? You're looking pretty snazzy today.
I got
For
dressed
our
up.
listeners, we have to describe Daniel Blue Eyes Dailey has on a beautiful, beautiful tie that has AUSA on it. And if you go to our website, I think you can get it. Can't you order online?
It's the purple limited edition.
Purple limited edition.
They're going
You
fast.
have it on today, but General Brown had it on yesterday.
He did.
Are you trying to copy him?
No, I had to go to Capitol Hill today.
Speaking of Capitol Hill, you've testified before Congress before, right?
Oh, yeah, several times.
How was it?
I'm still recovering.
What? You've been retired for how long now?
Well, it's a good excuse to go to the spa every once in a while. But no, in all honesty,
spa.
it's hard. It's a daunting task. It really is. And it takes an enormous amount of time to prepare for.
Yes.
Yeah.
So would you say that the preparation is harder than the actual testimony?
I would say it's daunting.
Yes.
Months, literally months of preparation.
Months.
Months.
Was it because of all the topics, or was it because it was Dan Dailey?
No, well, probably both. Probably both. I'm a slow learner. Slow learner. That's right. But no, it's the number of topics, and the Army's huge. It's humongous. We have the Army, the Army Corps of Engineer, Army, and it's an enterprise. We own 154 cities. Military bases are cities. Yes. And the things that Sergeant Major of the Army are in charge of are, like family and soldier welfare, recreation, morale, support, child care. It's just an endless amount of topics that are important to our elected leaders. They're very important.
Right.
So, Les, what about you? Did you ever have to go up on the Hill and testify?
Yes, I did.
And how did it go for you?
I think it went fine. It was during COVID, so it was very awkward.
Ooh.
Yeah. So, we had our mask on, and they had us sitting at, normally you sit at the table together, but they had us separate, right? And so they had all the inspectors general from all the services. All right. I'm the biggest guy in the room, but I was sitting at the smallest table. What's up with that?
You were like the kid that didn't fit in his desk. He didn't fit in his desk at school.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was funny, but it's funny now, but it wasn't funny then.
You know what, though? This stuff's still on C-SPAN somewhere.
I know. Somebody.
Shh. Oh, yes. For our listeners out there.
They can Google it. Are you trying to say they can find it?
Google that. Yeah. It's either on YouTube or C-SPAN, I promise.
Yeah, one of those. Well, if it's on C-SPAN, it means it's on YouTube now, too.
That's right, yeah.
You could Google Dan Dailey testifies before Congress.
No, Google Les Smith testifies to Congress, doesn't fit in chair. So, Les, the reason why we're spending so much time talking about Congress and Capitol Hill is because our guest today is one of the very people that put me through the ringer. This person is the subject matter expert in taking care of families for our Army and many other things. But she has been there many years. So one of her tasks for new guys like me, every 4 or 5 years, a bunch of new generals and new sergeant majors come to the Pentagon, is her daunting task is to educate us. So we can be able to.
Here comes another one.
Here comes another one. I got to train this one. It's like training the new puppy. Yeah. She's got to train me, and she'll probably talk about it.
Yeah, I think so. I can't wait to hear that part. Because I think she almost brought you to tears.
Well, she did. They did exactly what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to be ruthless. They're supposed to be very hard. They're supposed to be challenge you. And they also months before what they call the murder board. The murder board is not the board, the testimony. It's what you do in the Pentagon before going up there to practice,
which is always harder.
Which is always hard.
Yes,
which is always harder. Yeah,
yeah. So we should welcome our guest. What do you think?
I think so.
So Miss Dee Geise, welcome to Army Matters.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, and it's always good to see both of you.
Oh, we appreciate it.
You made our day. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which gets to the first question I have to ask you, Dee. You've been in the Pentagon for quite some time, right? And Les and I both want to know. You've worked with several IGs and several sergeant majors in the Army. Who's your favorite?
Well, I'm looking at him on the screen right now. Hands down, my favorites.
This is why she's so good. She's the right answer.
Yeah, the right answer. The right answer, but yeah, just good enough.
Yeah.
So, Dee, where are you originally from?
Born in South Jersey, raised in South Florida.
Okay. Give us a little bit more.
Yeah, so I was very, very young when we moved out of New Jersey into South Florida. My sister had a health issue. She had asthma. And, I don't want to date myself, but in the 60s, it was very industrial in South Jersey. So her doctor recommended that we either go to Arizona or Florida. My grandparents were in Florida, so that's where we went. We headed south.
Wow.
So I grew up in a tiny little town called Lantana outside West Palm Beach, Florida, about a mile from the beach. And It was just a magical childhood.
Nice. So did you have any connection to the military growing up?
None. My father was in the Navy during the Korean War. the entire conflict. But we had no memory of his service, only, finding pictures of him with his Navy uniform on. So I wasn't a military brat, really was not familiar with the military at all.
And then you became an Army spouse. Now, I know, just like all spouses, there's difficulty at times, especially when your first duty station is Germany. What was the hardest moment of that time?
That's an easy question for me to answer because we had come back for training. We were, in and out of the country in less than 9 months. And had I known, I would have kept my job in Germany, sent him here to train and come back. But we didn't know at the time. And it was during the Balkan deployments. We were at Fort Leavenworth. I was expecting our second child. I was told by Delta Airlines, you cannot fly unless you go right now. So I pretty much had to pack up out of Leavenworth, get on a plane. The good news was I'd already been in Germany for a couple of years. So I knew my way around. I had friends there. They let me borrow a car. I signed for housing, get some DRMO furniture, and get a household kind of set up. While he finished school, came to Germany with our older one because he was due to deploy. And you know what that's like 2 weeks before your deployment. What are you doing? Not at home. You're out training, right?
Yeah.
So my due date was the day after his deployment date. So we were just going to carry on with the orders as they were written. We got up in the morning and I took him to his unit for his deployment, came home and went into labor. So the day of his deployment, I had our second. So, and he was already gone. He was halfway to his duty station in theater, and by the time he landed, they congratulated him on his new baby boy.
Yeah, it's different times then. I was in the field when Holly gave birth to our son. And it's just different times. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of proud of the fact that we try not to do that anymore.
Yeah, we've changed just a bit over those years.
Yeah.
When did you go to Germany?
We were in Germany from 89 to 99.
Nice. So before or after the wall came down?
During. So the wall came down while we were there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, Dee, I was in Germany at the same time. I got there in 1990 and left in 93. What was that moment like, being there for that?
Like you were watching history from the very front row. It was pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
And we have, if I look hard enough, we've got a great piece of that wall in our house. And actually, my husband's brother was a soldier at the time, too. He was stationed in Hanau. We have a nice little piece of the wall. He's got an entire boulder of that wall. We just knew it was something life-changing for the world.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
Very pivotal time in the history of America, and that area.
Do you speak German? How good is it?
Ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch.
I know some German too.
Ein bisschen of Deutsch? Einmal bitte.
Einmal. I can order like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Bier.
Bier.
I
know how to. Wo ist der Bahnhof? Where is the
Bahnhof?
Yeah. When I got done drinking the beer, I could say to the Germans, "Wo ist der Bahnhof?
Exactly.
Where's the train station?"
Exactly. Genau.
So, when did you first start helping other Army families? You talked about that in Germany because you formed that village that's there. But when did you start helping other families?
Well, I'd say I think I remember being in Fort Benning, Georgia. It was in the first year or two that we were married.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a young spouse that had called me one day. She was getting hired, I think, as a civilian and needed a physical. And so set up her doctor's appointment and gets to the MTF and they're not there. They're not available. They changed their hours. So we knew back in the day, right? So when I married my soldier in the 80s, our medical department was there for medical readiness and soldiers were the priority. And if there was availability, that's when, spouses and family members use medical. We've come a long way since then. But that's what precisely had happened. And what she wanted me to do is she said, can you call the brigade commander and tell him to tell that doctor to, give me my physical today. And I thought to myself, well, bless your heart, but no, like that's not how this works. You just need to reschedule. And, more and more having conversations like that, you realize that if you didn't grow up in this environment, you really need to learn how to navigate the environment and the challenges associated with it, right?
In my personal opinion, I've said this and said it in testimony to Congress, is that bar none, we have the best care of families out of any organization, and I mean that, any organization in the world. We do, and largely because of efforts of people like you. Dee, you started your journey off as a young Army spouse. You had a career and you worked, and now you have an entire career behind you where you've taken care of our families. What would you tell a brand new Army spouse or yourself back then when you first started this journey? What advice would you give?
Okay, so I would absolutely say get in there as soon as you possibly can and learn everything there is to know about the not only the Army, but what your spouse does for a living. I mean, my husband's field artillery, and I had no idea. So it took me a lot of time to really understand what his job was and why it was important. So, but I did it, and it helped our relationship too, really understanding what he did for a living. And now, here I am 39 years later, and I get to say things like splash out, right? So.
Yeah. Nice. And you actually know what that means, right?
Yeah, yes, I do.
But you got to explain, what does splash out mean? What our listeners want to know, since you said that as an artillery
splash
spouse.
Over, splash out, right?
That's right.
That's
when
rounds complete. Yeah.
That's right.
That's right.
Look at that. Whoa. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'm impressed that you can call for fire. We should do a fire mission for the audience.
That's right. That's right.
No.
I got qualified on an M9 too, so that's a different story. But
that's impressive.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Yeah.
Oh, come on now, you got to tell us that story. So how did that happen?
The job that my husband is in now, he's retired, but if you recall the old DTRA.
Yeah, Defense Threat Reduction Agency. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
I'm very familiar.
Yeah. So he did all the deployments for DTRA. And a part of that is making sure that whoever deployed had their qualifications. And he was trying to qualify an individual, get the training, but they needed at least 3 people to go through M9 qualification training. So I went.
How'd you do?
I got my qualification. And I have to say, it's important. We paid for it out of the Geise household budget.
Yeah.
We weren't going to report you. You're okay.
No. But there's
I'm
always
no longer the Inspector General.
There's always a lawyer listening, though. So good injectee.
That's right. Yeah.
That's right.
So
yeah,
that's good.
Yeah. So Dee, you travel all over the country and around the world. Because our families live globally, and you mentioned overseas. Mm-hmm. Is there an interaction with an Army family member from the past few months that stands out to you?
Well, I do. And I'm going to share this, and it's a little concerning for me because it goes back to the communication piece and spouses really knowing, understanding where all these benefits reside on the installation. And we were at JBLM, Joint Base Lewis McChord. And at Joint Base Lewis McChord, there are wonderful assets for special needs families, right? We have this incredible autism center there. And I was doing focus group with soldiers' families and their children. And after we were finishing up, and the soldier, the spouse with a young child on their hip came up to me and said, my child was diagnosed with autism 6 months ago, and there are no resources here. That was profound to me. So that tells me a couple things. We have a breakdown in communication. We have a breakdown in training our providers to make sure that there's a warm handoff between a family in need and obviously some providers on the ground. So that was a little rough for me, rough pill to swallow on that one. But it just really reiterates the fact that we need to do a better job at communication, which is such a challenge. We have transient, right? We have things are a little bit different on our post. We have soldiers in sessions all the time. We have soldiers ETSing and deploying and retiring all the time. And so there's this constant churn of people in and out of the door. And how do you keep up with the communication in a thoughtful and meaningful way? We put things on Facebook. We put things on YouTube. We have mass emails. We have this type of communication, right, that we're doing between the three of us. And I honestly, I struggle at how do I get this right? Because it's so important.
Join AUSA, the Army's premier professional association and host of the largest land power exposition in the United States. AUSA is open to everyone, including all ranks and components. So whether you have a relationship with the U.S. Army or simply want to honor those who serve, you can learn more online at ausa.org/join.
Welcome back to Army Matters. Now, Dee, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do in the Army G9? Why is that job so important?
So glad you asked that question because we've had discussions on it. So the Deputy Chief of Staff G9 is installations. So think of the Army cities, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot that goes on. There is housing and barracks and commissaries and PXs. There's railheads, right? Where we project power.
Yes.
There's roads, traffic lights, motor pools. So we deploy personnel and we project power from our installations.
Mm-hmm.
We also have this portfolio of quality of life programs and services that are delivered on those installations. That is what the Deputy Chief of Staff of G9 does. So let me go back just a little bit, and without getting boring in a history lesson, but the Army understood the value of centralized installation management in the 90s, right? Mm-hmm. We operated very different before then. Senior commanders on the installation were given a budget, and then you have to make a choice between, do you invest in your infrastructure or do you invest in your readiness mission? And we should never put a commander in that position, right? Mm-hmm. You have to invest in your mission. Our job is to fight and win the nation's war and provide, combat-ready formations. That's what the Army is in the business for. But at the same time, it's important to us to provide quality of life programs and services. Those are tied to our retention and readiness as well. But that's why the G9 is important.
We started with you talking about the young spouse you were in 1989 and some of the challenges, obviously, that you faced, and so did our other Army families. And we've done so much throughout the decades to correct that. What is the one thing you're most proud of that the Army has changed since the first day you became an Army spouse?
I can only pick one.
You can only pick one.
We'll give you two.
All right. If it's now you're the director. Yeah. You're the director, so we'll give you two. We'll give you two.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You give you two.
It's spouse employment.
Yeah.
It's very important to me. I know I can tell you some pretty bad stories, but I won't on my experiences with employment.
Yeah.
And some of the feedback that I've received from my employers, which are pretty breathtaking. So I'm most proud of the fact that we have highlighted this as a quality of life task force issue. And while good work has been done, there's still much to do. And this issue is enduring with regard to turning over 70,000 soldiers a year. And there are spouses for 50% of them. And some spouses want jobs and some spouses want career. And we are on a quest to understand what that means and how we can help them achieve the goal. Again, I don't have the empirical evidence, but I can tell you it's tied to retention.
And readiness.
And readiness. Absolutely.
Yes. Dan and I resemble what you just said on the other side.
And readiness.
Yeah.
That's right.
Exactly. So this is great.
And I'll tell you, I'm passionate about it too.
I agree.
And I was very vocal of the fact that I believe military spouse should be a protected category in the hiring process. I honestly, and for probably justifiable reasons, employers have to make decisions about their employees, right? But we've seen it time and time again where a highly qualified Army spouse will not get a position solely because of the fact that they're military.
That's right. I've experienced it on more than one occasion.
Yeah.
And I was told I wasn't getting a raise because they know how much my husband made and I didn't need more money.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly why I think
Yeah.
we should advocate to our elected officials that military spouse should be in a protected category.
So Dee, how do you find balance? I mean, you're busy, your spouse is busy, but between all that you're working on in your personal life, how do you do it?
So
you can say not very well. That's okay to say that.
Yeah, I failed at it, Dee. I
Yes.
failed.
I'm terrible at it.
Yes.
I'm
I'm terrible at it.
Yeah.
But let me tell you something. When my kids were young, they were my priority, even though I was working, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I found employment that allowed me to be into work at 6 o'clock in the morning, although I kind of do that now anyway, without kids at home. But, and then I could leave at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I was there for them after school.
Yeah.
I was there at the wrestling practice and the track meets and those types of things. So that's what helped me balance. Not that it made it less busy. It was way more busy. I got to tell you, when there's opportunity, I was just talking to one of the staff. We've got a new staff in, and I sit down and to get to know them a little bit. I said, when I can leave, I leave. And I know a lot of people in this building that don't, right? They just say, I don't have any more meetings today, but look at all this stuff that I can do. Mm-hmm. This day and age with technology, and I got a laptop at home. If I could have my laptop on the counter while I'm stirring a pot of soup and also being able to have a conversation with my husband or my kids if they're home, I'm just going to pack my stuff up and go home. I think that's the best that we can do right now. But it's hectic. I'll tell you, you can spend 12, 14 hours a day in this building.
Oh, yeah.
Not blink an eye.
Yeah.
Miss your lunch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not hydrate. And just, keep chugging along. But you really have to discipline yourself to not do that.
That's right.
And when I look at the clock and I don't have anything past 4 or 5 o'clock, I'm going to pack up and I'm going to go.
That's good. That's
Well said. It's not work-life balance. I believe there's no such thing as work-life choices.
Yeah.
It's work-life
True.
choices. Yeah.
That's exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So Dee, Dan asked you this earlier, but what would you tell a new Army spouse about this journey that you've been on, about this sense of purpose, this sense of, everything that you've done and everything you do now? Is it worth it?
I wouldn't change a thing, and I would do it over again if somebody walked in here today and said, hey, I'm going to transform you to 1986 and a soldier's going to ask you to marry him. There is such a sense of pride in being able to serve not only these great soldiers and their family members, but this nation. I sit back today and think to myself, as a young spouse, and I'll tell you, there's another spouse who was a classmate of my husband's small group in Fort Leavenworth, and she is a senior executive in the Marine Corps.
Nice.
And I said, holy smokes, Marie, can you imagine us even thinking for a hot second in 1995 that you and I would be bouncing around, the halls of the Pentagon in this capacity? And it's just been an absolute joy. It is. I never thought I'd have a career that looks like the career. It was very serendipitous, right? We talked about having to start all over again, which I had to do a couple of times. But I guess it was part of that journey that I had to travel during that time to kind of get to where I am today. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't trade our military experience, our moving around. You can't replace your acquaintances and your friends that you meet along the way. And it is just absolutely phenomenal. So that's what I would say. Do it.
Yeah, do it.
That's amazing. Well, Dee, I appreciate your time today, and we appreciate you here on Army Matter. But more importantly, all you've done for our country and our nation as an Army spouse who serves alongside their soldier, and all you've done as a senior civilian to care for the soldiers and families that we love. Thank you.
And thank you both for your service. Give Holly a hug for me.
Every October, AUSA hosts its annual meeting and expo, and at our 2024 event, we invited attendees to swing by our booth and answer some questions. One thing we asked everyone was, what drew you to a life of service and inspired you to continue? Today, we'll find out how a young drill sergeant's hard assignment led to her gaining a new family.
Hilson Veronica Melendez. I, in 2008, was selected as a drill sergeant, and I served as a drill sergeant for about 2 years at Fort Jackson. And that was absolutely the most impactful highlight of my entire career, changing young volunteers' lives, watching them transform from civilians to young leaders who maybe didn't even realize they had it in them to be amazing soldiers, individuals who I know are doing amazing things in the Army now. It was a very tough job, very time consuming as far as being away from my family because, they're there. Well, you go to work and they're sleeping and you come home and they're sleeping. So it's like they're there, but they're, very occasionally do you actually spend time with them. So the young volunteers are who essentially become your family at that point, and you become their mentors, and you want to hope that you do the right thing so that they can become excellent mentors someday.
If you'd like to share with us your call to service or Army story, leave us a voicemail at 703-236-2914 or email a voice note to podcast@ausa.org.
To all our listeners, thanks for joining us. Army Matters is brought to you by the Association of the United States Army, the U.S. Army's professional association, member-supported, Army-connected. Visit us at ausa.org for more information or to become a member. Your membership helps AUSA continue to carry out its mission, educate, inform, and connect with the total Army, our industry partners, and supporters of a strong national defense. Today's episode was hosted by Lieutenant General Retired Les Smith and SMA Retired Dan Dailey, and anchor hosted by Carrie Barrow-Heckes. Anthony Dale Call is the producer and writer, and Andy Bosnack is the supervising sound editor. Ellen Toner is the content editor. Unzinga Curry is the executive producer, and the senior producers are Carrie Barrow-Heckes and LaSharon Duncan. Be sure to subscribe to Army Matters wherever you get your podcasts, and please leave a review. As you know, we love seeing stars in the Army, especially if it comes in the form of a 5-star review. AUSA's Army Matters podcast can also be heard on Reach Across America Radio on Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, on the iHeartRadio app, the Odyssey app, and the TuneIn app with the search of the word Wreath. AUSA's Army Matters podcast primary purpose is to entertain. The podcast does not constitute advice or services. While guests are invited to listen, listeners, please note that you're not being provided professional advice from the podcast or the guest. The views and opinions of our guests do not necessarily reflect the views of AUSA. For questions or to provide topic recommendations, email us at podcast@ausa.org. I'm LaSharon Duncan. Hope you have a great Army day. Hooah!